In case you missed it, here's Dave and Cheryl's favorite moments of the week.
The election is over. The results are in. The National Toy Hall of Fame announced its newest inductees.
So there are 4 this year, including baseball cards. They've been around since the 1860s or so. Cabbage Patch Kids, of course, they debuted in 1982 and caused pandemonium.
Oh my gosh. What was that movie? Was it Jingle All the Way where they were fighting over a doll at the time? Based on this.
Was it based on
that? Yeah.
Also into the National Toy Hall of Fame, Nerf. First Nerf product was a 4-inch foam ball that the Parker brothers sold in 1970. They built it as a world's first indoor ball. And the Fisher-Price corn popper. Do you remember these that you push around and it got the little things in it and it was like...
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't actually nominated. They inducted it as a bonus in honor of the 25th anniversary in sort of the forgotten toy category.
So what were the other ones in that forgotten toy category? I just looked it up. My Little Pony, introduced in the 1980s.
Okay, I would say that is not a forgotten toy. They're big still.
It was reintroduced back in 2003. Pez first emerged as a breath mint in 1927, but in 1948, they turned it into a candy and added a small little, mechanical box to dispense the Pez bricks.
Yep.
The Pogo Stick and Transformers out in the mid-'80s. So sort of, when they say forgotten, I think it's just they've kind of gotten pushed to the side a bit.
They've been nominated maybe a couple times, haven't made it in because... you think about all the toys that are out there. So some of the finalists that didn't make it in this year include Ken dolls and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, along with Battleship, Bingo, Bop It, Slime, Choose Your Own Adventure books, Connect 4, and the Little Tykes Red Car.
Oh, man, I thought that one would have gotten in for sure.
Well, that's the thing is they only put in 3 or 4 every year. They've only been doing it for 25 years, so... it's really the creme de la creme of toys making it in.
Last year, Light Bright, Spinning Tops, and Masters of the Universe made it in. So looking around for Christmas presents for the kids, right? And my wife's like, well, I'm going to get them some clothes and stuff. I'm like, boring. So as grandpa, I'm just like, well, no, I want them to have something fun.
Yeah.
And so I looked at Battleship at first, and then I was talking to my daughter and I said, there's so many little pieces. She goes, yeah, I think we had it for them once before and they lost all the pieces. And I'm like, yeah, maybe not yet.
They're a little older now, so it might be
older.
Better, but...
Then I was looking at this little air hockey game that I'm leaning towards, right? But at the same time, while I was looking at that, you know what they had in the store I was in was, you ever go over to I'm sure they had it at the Wheels, where you would bowl and it would you get the different points. Skee ball?
Skee ball.
Yeah.
Skee ball, yeah.
So a miniature version of skee ball.
Oh.
And I was just like I almost passed out for a second. You know what I mean? You're a little dizzy.
You wanted to buy it for yourself.
A little flashback back to my misspent youth in the summertime in the Waseca Beach area. We used to go there every summer. My dad loved Waseca Beach.
And go to the arcades.
Oh, the arcades up and down that one strip area before you get to the beach. And again, this was also in the time when I was probably 7 or 8. And my parents would be at the beach and I'm like, yeah, see you later. And I'm like, okay. Right? And you go off on your own. These toys make you think, right, of a different time.
Yum. Science.
It's not rocket science. Check it out. I blinded us with science.
A 14-year-old Virginia high school student was awarded $25,000 and crowned as America's top young scientist by 3M for inventing a bar of soap that helps to fight skin cancer.
SCTS is a compound-based bar of soap. It's charged with cancer-fighting chemicals like imidazoquinolines to help treat the skin. As of right now, I'm planning on further commercializing SCTS, and by 2028, I hope to turn SCTS into a nonprofit organization where I can provide equitable and accessible skin cancer treatment to as many people as possible.
Did I mention he's 14?
Wow.
14 years old.
And I love that he's just wants to make it available to everyone and not just patent it and make a boatload of money.
Now you can turn to your 14-year-old and say, what are you doing?
Hey, check this out. Your phone might be able to soon tell how drunk you are. Researchers are apparently working on an app, and it'll be able to apparently tell how much you've been drinking by just listening to you read tongue twisters out loud.
But what if you're just terrible at those anyway? And they're like, wow, how are you drunk at 5 in the morning?
Maybe, or I know people that are the reverse, where maybe they can't say the tongue twister when they're sober, but when they're drunk, they've had a few, suddenly they can rhyme it off perfectly.
In brain news, Elon Musk's company, Neuralink, is ready to start testing its computer chip brain implants on humans. Thousands have already lined up to be at the front of the line for it.
Pass.
Now, you say that because you think it's nefarious, and some people may end up using it for that. But I think it's to help people with mobility issues. I think that's the goal in this
Well,
study.
that could work. I'd just be afraid that suddenly they're going to start charging you $5 a month to have access to it,
Or they remove it.
like X's now. Hey, in space news, an astronaut lost a tool bag during a spacewalk last week. Lost a tool bag during a spacewalk. This just happened last week. NASA says you can actually see it just using a pair of binoculars because it's reflective enough that you can see sunlight bouncing off of it. They say it's going to slowly make its way back into the atmosphere within the next few months and burn up on the way in.
But if you ever see it or get a photograph of it using a telescope, let us know. That'd be pretty wild. Also this, in other space news, NASA announced that Saturn will lose its rings in 2025. But don't worry, they'll be back. Because of Saturn's orbit, we'll be seeing them from the side, so they'll be on edge and just look like they've disappeared.
Oh. That's
Optical
weird.
illusion.
That's very weird. Hey, in September, some small mummified bodies were shown to Mexican Parliament. Do you remember this? The guy insisted that it was evidence of alien life on Earth, but now a team of doctors brought to Congress claimed the bodies were all of once living organisms. However, none of the doctors said they were proof of alien life. They had elongated heads and limbs with 3 fingers and toes, but they said it wasn't really...
They just don't want to come out and say
Aliens.
aliens. That's what it is. But, come on. They just don't want to admit that it could be a type of life on Earth that they can't understand.
But they also want to make sure that people that they're still following science and not, giving into some
Superstition
conspiracy.
and stuff. Yeah. And finally, in animal news, we learned that helicopters can put crocodiles in the mood.
Bow, chicka, bow, wow.
It's like they start mating when it rains. The sound of thunder or helicopters can make them all hot and bothered. It came up because some military choppers recently flew over a crocodile farm in Australia, and they all started losing it. Making little baby crocodiles.
You know what, though? If we ever have, if they ever start to go extinct or whatever, I guess we know exactly how to, get them in the mood to mate.
You know how? Get to the chopper! I'm going to tell you something that I bet a lot of people don't realize. That passing on a double line is not against the law.
No, it is not illegal, but a lot of people believe it is illegal. And now an MPP from Northern Ontario is planning to introduce a bill to make it illegal under the Highway Traffic Act because he wants some clarification around the issue and so that police have some stronger enforcement powers.
So the bill is going to be called Chad's Law. This is after a young man who was seriously injured in an accident on the highway near Kapuskasing. The MPP says he was surprised himself to learn that the solid double line is a suggestion, not a rule in Ontario. And a sergeant who works with provincial traffic operations with the OPP said that when he was growing up as a young man, even he didn't even know for years that it was a guideline and not a law.
So OPP do have the ability to fine a driver for unsafe passing, which if convicted has a penalty of $85 plus court costs, but there is 3 demerit points with that. So the bill would see a penalty if a driver is convicted of passing on a solid double line go up to $400 plus up to 3 demerit points.
So this MPP plans to introduce the bill next week, a week from today, November 21st. He says it does have the support of multiple municipalities, police, truck drivers, that kind of thing too, trying to make the roadways just a little bit safer.
But right now, if you didn't know, you can pass on a double yellow. It's not illegal. It's just highly suggested that you don't.
And it's funny how we're influenced by certain things, right? So I was telling you how near where I live at Tecumseh Public School, they had put up those speed things, right?
Oh, to tell you what your speed is. Yep.
Boy, it really affected traffic and people were slowing down. I also felt good because if you hit 40 right on, it would go solid. I noticed that. I was like, ooh, can I hit it?
It was like a game.
A little bit.
Stop flashing at you.
But now that they're gone, because now they've moved them somewhere else,
Yeah, now it's back up again.
I can already see people flying down McNaughton Avenue once again. So they need laws in place just to try and slow people down and keep us safe. Prepare to feel a little bit older. Urban Outfitters is now selling refurbished iPods and calling them vintage.
Yes.
iPods, they came out in the early 2000s, right?
I still have my iPod. It was my graduation gift from university because it was before smartphones, really. You know, when you could have everything on your phone. I had a separate iPod to load all my music and stuff up on.
I've got
still
some
works,
MP3
too.
players that I have as backup, right? So my wife bought me a watch that I store some music. And all
Okay,
that,
yep.
Right, so now that connects up to my wireless headphones, which aren't earbuds. They go outside. They're the ones that wrap around your ears and they're bone conducting.
Shockwave?
Yeah, shocks.
Yes.
I love them, by the way. But how things change and so quickly. So a listing for a 4th generation iPod from 2004 described it as, quote, a genuine piece of vintage retro tech and the perfect blend of new millennium design and modern features.
So the 4th gen one is before touchscreens. This is the one that I had. It had the wheel on the front to scroll through your songs. And they don't support wireless headphones. You got to have one with a jack. But the wild part of this whole thing is the price tag. They're selling them for $350.
Oof.
Several people pointed out you can actually buy one on eBay for like $35. But Urban Outfitters is also selling another one, the original iPod Mini. Remember those? Mm-hmm. So these are listed for $200, and it looks like both models are already sold out online.
They're not on the website anymore. So apparently some people, I'm guessing maybe younger people, actually paid that much because for them, they'd never really seen it before.
And you know what, though? The more I think about this, the more I'm not surprised. I'm just mad that they're calling it vintage. But I know a lot of Gen Z or Zs, or Z or whatever you want to call them, they're trying to separate themselves and not be on social media as much. So this is a way for them to still listen to music and podcasts, but not always have your phone with you.
Now, wired headphones have been coming back into vogue, and
I've been using mine because
earbuds
my
and stuff.
wireless earbuds died, and because I had them for like maybe 6 or 7 years, and they had gotten kind of janky, and then finally they kicked the bucket. And I was just like, well, I have all these wired like earbuds around. I'm just going to use those instead rather than spend $50 or more on a pair of headphones.
Do you remember the Walkman? I mean, the cassette Walkman, that was fine. That was, you could walk around. But then they came up with those CD ones.
Ugh. The anti-shock skip and anti-skip was trash. Total trash.
I'll put it on anti-skip. You walk 5 feet, like was skipping all over the place. And heaven forbid there was the smallest scratch on that CD. Would never read it. Earlier this morning, we were telling you all about how Urban Outfitters is selling iPods and calling them vintage.
Vintage.
Yeah, from like 2003. Well, if you did any of these things growing up, you're probably old. Someone came up with a bunch of things you'll only remember from your youth. If you're a little bit older, here's some of the best.
Number 1, using a pencil to rewind a cassette tape.
Well, to get the tape back in,
Yep,
right?
if it spit out somehow.
So you had to pull it out very slowly out of the machine because you didn't want that tape snapping.
No, definitely not.
So you had to use that pencil to get it back in there. How about this? Hearing someone yell, "Get off the internet, I need to use the phone."
Or did you, ours was you had to get off the internet for them to use the phone. But I remember some of my friends, if someone picked up the phone while you were on the internet, it would boot you off immediately. So if you wanted them, like if their parents were mad that they were on the internet, you go, "Oh, time's up." They pick up the phone and kick them off.
Don't pick up the phone. I'm downloading a song from Napster.
It's going to take 17 hours.
How about this one? Cars that needed 2 different keys. Are you old enough to remember that?
I don't think we ever had that, but I remember we had some vehicles here at the station when I first started that had that. So you had one to unlock the door, and then a different key to start the engine.
Yeah, and then
I found it so confusing. I was like, why? Why do we have 2 keys?
Well, back in the day, that one key that would open the door would also open your trunk.
Was that like the valet key? Is that what they called that?
No idea I didn't know it had an official name.
So that you could lock your trunk and your glove box if you valeted and they couldn't get into it.
Oh, no. You just shut the trunk and that, well, maybe, but just that key would open up the trunk, right? There was no trunk release.
So the key that went in your ignition didn't open, it was useless for anything else.
It was just the ignition. Different shaped, right? Mm-hmm. How about this? Printing out your directions from MapQuest.
Yes.
Definitely.
And some people still do that. It's always nice to have a backup.
Well, you need a navigator in that point, obviously, because, you can't be looking at those papers and
I
driving.
remember seeing someone, they had put it like a string over their rearview mirror with a clip. Like one of those.
Like a little clipboard or like a.
No, like one of those black clips. Mm-hmm. And they would have clipped so that they could look over. It was like the original hands-free navigation.
How about this? Having a notebook where you kept track of all your friends' phone numbers.
Oh, yeah.
I would say you still have that now.
It's your phone.
No, I would say you still have a notebook, but instead of your friends' phone numbers, it's probably all your passwords. Because there's so many.
And you gotta have different ones for each one. Do you remember this? I do. If you wanted to watch a movie, you had to switch to Channel 3. Yeah, this was back before your TV had the different input options.
I think you had to do that to play video games, too.
Yep.
Yeah, you had to go to that channel.
And it was always staticky.
Accidentally burning yourself with a car's cigarette lighter.
I did that once as a kid.
Oh, we've all done it. That's a rite of passage because you wanted to see how hot. You were always told, don't play with that. Don't play with that. I remember my parents leaving me in the car in a different time. And I remember going, I want to see you. And plugging it in and popping it out and then burning my thumb on it. And then putting it back before they got in the car so they would know.
Your parents probably left you in the car too when they went into line and stand in line at the bank.
Yeah, that would be another, or the post office for sure.
And finally, if you a sign that you're growing up and growing old, if you remember listening to the radio, but then if you didn't like what was on, you'd pull something out of your CD holder, which was probably on your sun visor.
Oh, you'd have like 10 or 12 of them?
Oh, yeah.
Or if you were really fancy, you had the book with the zipper. And you could open that up, and they were all in little individual little sleeves.
There was a great post the other day where someone was like, drivers today are so distracted by cell phones. And it was like me in the early 2000s trying to drive with MapQuest directions printed out and a binder of CDs trying to find a certain song.
It was a different time. I question whether or not they actually polled real pet owners for this, or maybe just some people that bought a pet during the pandemic and then regretted it afterwards.
So a new study out of Michigan State University found that having pets might not actually make us happier. So early in the pandemic, May of 2020, researchers say they talked to over 750 people 3 separate times to gauge how they were coping. Now, in general, pet owners said that their pets were definitely helping because they were offering them companionship and affection, in that time when they were telling us to stay away from people.
6 feet apart.
But they also mentioned there were some downsides. Of course, costs, worrying about your pet's health, and how they could be a bit of a nuisance, especially when you were trying to work from home.
So in the end, the study found it was a wash. People who didn't have pets were just as happy overall. Quote, people say that pets make them happy, but when we actually measured the happiness, that doesn't appear to be the case.
So their theory is people without pets fill their lives up with other interests, and that stuff might make them just as happy as a pet would.
I don't know about that. When our youngest moved out, and then we had to say goodbye to the dog we had had the rescue for 11 years. He was about 14. I joked with my wife. I said, you had worse empty nests than when our youngest moved out. And we were both separately researching golden retrievers because I'd always wanted a golden retriever.
Yeah.
And we ended up with her. It kind of turned into a pandemic dog, but we got her in the fall of 2019. A few months later, the world ended. And so I can't even begin to explain how much she helped for our mental health during that time.
Well, I did get a pandemic dog, right? I adopted Coda. What was it, 2-3 years ago now? Right in the middle of the pandemic. I wasn't really planning on it. I always wanted to adopt a husky because we had them growing up. And, I wonder, though, with some of these people, maybe if they made a rash decision to get a dog at the start of the pandemic, because I know there was a rush, people clearing out shelters. But then you get home and maybe you have a dog or you got a puppy, but now you're not maybe spending the time necessarily with them to train them.
Which is certainly a major issue. So here's what we think about this study.
A new study finds that pets don't actually make us happier. Yeah, and the study also found that online shopping is just a fad. They also found that pizza is not a delicious go-to food, and Taylor Swift is just a flash in the pan. So pay attention to this one study that says pets don't really bring humans happiness or improve their well-being. Oh, and artificial intelligence isn't changing the way we do things.
Auto theft in Ontario, police say, has reached historic highs. And bad news if you own a Honda CR-V.
They were the most stolen vehicle in the province, at least according to this recent report. A group that has a goal of reducing crime and insurance fraud released the list of the top 10 most stolen vehicles in Ontario. And, just think about this last month. It seems to be a big issue in bigger cities like Toronto, but mean, I've also heard about a lot of thefts happening here in southern Ontario as well.
So what was number one? As we said, Honda CR-V, 2,600 thefts. Lexus RX series at number 2, 1,700, followed by Dodge Ram, the 1,500 series.
In at number 4, when it comes to the most stolen vehicles in Ontario, the Toyota Highlander, followed by the Land Rover Range Rover at number 5. Then you've got the Ford F-150 series, so another pickup truck on the list, the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and then the Jeep Wrangler. And then I think this is the only car on the list, but the Honda Civic came in the 9th spot.
And then the Acura RDX in at number 10. So far in 2023, police in Toronto say they're aware of almost 10,000 vehicles stolen in the city, including 3,500 stolen in Division 22 and 23 during this joint investigation they were doing.
So, I mean, it looks like they're targeting a lot of newer SUVs and higher-end SUVs and pickup trucks as well. Not so much EVs, which I was kind of surprised about.
But I'm not surprised, because where are these vehicles going? There was actually that big bust a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago in the GTA, where they arrested a bunch of people. I mean, talking 25, 30 people in an international theft ring. So these vehicles were being stolen in Canada, and they were finding them in countries in Africa or Asia. And that's how they're getting them onto boats, and they're shipping them overseas.
And so they're not wanting EVs. They're wanting pickup trucks and SUVs, you know, especially if they're driving them on some of these rough roads that are in some of these countries.
I mean, that's not to say there isn't chop shop still where vehicles get stolen, they take them all apart and sell all the parts. But some of these rings that have been operating lately in Canada have been shipping these vehicles as is overseas. I mean, in our area, yes, obviously there's some vehicles getting stolen. I wonder if it's more for joyrides or necessity as they're stealing other things and they steal your car too. So interesting to note what vehicles are the most stolen in Ontario. Some changes are coming for Apple and how it interacts with Android.
So this is good news if you're an Android user like Dave and myself. We're both Android diehards. Everyone else in my family, though, Apple, which is kind of a pain in the butt. So Apple's finally going to change the way they do their text messages, so your friends with iPhones will stop treating you like a second-class citizen. So if you have one of these phones, you know the issue. Over a decade, anyone on Android has had to deal with issues when they're getting texts or texting someone with an iPhone. The photos and videos come through blurry. The iMessage reactions like haha and hearting comes through a separate text in the group chat, and your message shows up as a green bubble instead of blue.
I mean, I think the bigger issue would be the photos, because we've noticed that before.
Yeah.
My wife and I, because she's an iPhone person, sharing photos back and forth, to be like, oh, why isn't this crisp?
I've just given up, and I send them through Facebook Messenger instead to my family members. So apparently, Apple just announced they're planning an update next year, which won't fix all of those things, but might fix most of them, including the photos and video quality.
Now, there'll be a higher quality. You'll be able to see when the other person is typing, just like when someone has an iPhone. And most importantly, one person with an Android won't, completely mess up a group chat for people too.
Yeah, because I'm in some group chats with friends. They're all iPhone users. I am the lone Android holdout. And it's such a mess. The one thing that probably won't change, though, is the green bubbles. One expert says blue text bubbles are, quote, a badge of the Apple tribe.
So it's not clear when the software update is coming. All Apple said is later next year. Stop asking us about it.
Sometime in the next 12 months.
Remember Blackberries?
I miss
BBMing.
I miss the physical keyboard on my BlackBerry so much some days.
I really liked the BlackBerry. It was the first, phone that I had when I came here. And I was like, man, I always liked it, but I think there's a documentary now, isn't there? Is it on Netflix? Or
no, it's on CBC, the CBC app.
About Jim Baselli and his chase for an NHL franchise.
Yeah, so it's not a documentary per se. It's who's the one Canadian? Jay Baruchel?
Jay Baruchel's in it. Yeah,
is in it. So it's a bit of a dramatization. Actually, my mom said she watched it. She said it was really good. She says she read some stuff afterwards that they kind of, for movie purposes, made some parts seem a lot bigger and more of an influence than they actually were.
I mean, there were some allegations from high-level executives that the company kind of was going in different directions because of the chase for an NHL franchise. They felt there was a lot of distraction at high levels.
But then I read something that said he actually only met with NHL officials about that maybe like 4 times over the course of 2 years.
I mean, it's such
Which isn't a ton if you think about it.
But yes, finally, some changes coming from Apple to Android.
You've been listening to Dave and Cheryl's favorite moments of the week.